Hello and welcome to another edition of Tag Team Talks. Today we're going to be talking about documentation as code and linting prose. This is part 3 of our 3-part series where we are going to demo how this works and show you it in action. If you haven't seen it already, please check out part 1, which is a broad overview of what it is. In general, creating tests that you apply to your documentation to improve your writing and ensure that you enforce your style guides. In part 2, we talked about the various different linters that are out there, from the most basic things built into Google Docs to the really powerful tool Vale that we're going to show off right now. My name is Michael Meyers. I'm the Managing Director of Tag1 Consulting, and I'm joined today by Lynette Miles, our Principal Technical Writer. Lynette, welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us again today. I can't wait to see this in action. We've been talking about this a lot, and so I conceptually got it. You gave me this great sense of all of these powerful things that you can do. Buzzword checkers, making sure we, always refer to our products in the, correct name and case, instead of press a button, it's click a button, it's amazing what you can do, but I haven't yet wrapped my head around it. And so I think seeing it in action is going to get me there. And yeah, I can't wait to see this. So let's jump right in. I'd love to see how this works.
All right. This means it's time to share my screen and hope I don't do anything really embarrassing. All right. Let me just make sure I've got the right screen. All right. I'm going to start with pulling up where Vale actually lives out in the world. Hopefully, is that showing right?
Yep.
Hopefully it's showing. Excellent. Okay. So this is the repository, the GitHub repository for Vale. So like it says, it is a syntax-aware linter for prose, built with speed and extensibility in mind, and it absolutely is. So Vale itself lives. So this is the command line version here. A Vale server that Vale server is not is open source. You have to get a license for it, and I haven't had a chance to try it out, but I really, really want to, because it's the kind of thing that will make it easier for people who aren't as command line excited, or they're just not as command line friendly, to be able to share things and run Vale in their browser and stuff like that. But personally, right now, I'm used to using Vale through the command line, and I have it integrated with Visual Studio Code. There's just an extension that you can install, and then we'll run Vale for you.
So it's free, it's open source, and the GitHub is github.com/errata-ai.
Yes. So as I go in here, there's styles. Here we go. So I'm going to go into the styles directory. These are the styles that Vale starts with. When you download Vale, so you can do it just from the command line. It's like brew install Vale. It is that simple. And then it comes with these styles. There's actually an install guide, I think, from the top level. But so I'm going to look at, like we talked about in the previous thing, is about write good. So write good is a wow, I think that's actually a naive linter. I wonder if that's native, just be native. We talked about passive voice. Like passive voice is so just pervasive in our language. It's really, really pervasive in written language. So this is a YAML file, and it literally says, it will pop up. It says, it looks for, I'm sure I'm gonna get some details wrong here. Extends I think it's a class, the existence class. It lets you pop up a message, or not a pop up, but it prints out a message that says, this thing might be passive voice. Use active voice if you can. It ignores the case, and it's a warning. So there's 3 levels. There's suggestion, warning, and I forget what the red one is. But that's error. when you have your product name wrong, or misspellings, or like curly quotes. Like if you don't use curly quotes, because Google Docs is notorious for curly quotes. So when you copy and paste from Google Docs, everything is curly quotes, and I hate curly quotes. So we wrote a test for curly quotes. Stop it. So we can go and search and replace on it. So it does things like, these are the most common passive verbs. And so it looks through all, well, and then it's got, a lot of the very, very common, like this list is huge.
So it's basically a dictionary file of all of the words that are, typically used when you're in the passive voice.
Mm-hmm. And then it just flags it and says, hey, maybe you want to reword that. And I can't tell you how many times this has just made me had to stop and rewrite a sentence, a paragraph, because sometimes like, oh, how do I reword that to be less passive? Oh, I have to reword this entire, okay. But in the end, when you're trying to communicate a task, how to complete something, writing it in an active voice is clearer and easier for a user to understand nearly all of the time. The only problem that I've run into with this is that occasionally this looks for passive voice, and future tense sometimes looks like passive voice. So you click this thing will happen.
So
it's not passive. That's
it's not 100% accurate, but it is phenomenal in what it can do.
Yes. So just like it doesn't teach you how to write, but it encourages you to be better about what you are writing. And when you're trying to onboard, say, a junior writer, somebody who doesn't have a lot of technical writing experience, being able to basically like, here's the thumb screws, here's the hammer, this is going to hammer that style into you. You don't have a choice. I'm not even going to look at this with the number of errors that you've sent me. Go back and fix all of these types of things. Go do that. And you're spending, like, I hate to break it down to numbers, monetary, but straight up, it's cheaper to make the junior writer do that than to make a senior writer, your principal writer. Like, you don't want me to be spending my time fixing passive voice when I could be writing lots of big content, right? That doesn't make sense. Like, straight up, it doesn't make sense monetarily. That's
when I could be writing lots of passive voice.
I could be writing. Right, now, see, I have tests, so I catch those before I send them to my editor now, especially because I, got caught with saying naughty words in my text one time. So, all right. So, let's see. So if we look at, we were talking about, Michael asked in either earlier or in the previous section about buzzwords. We could do things like, here's this, corporate speak, these kinds of things. Like, this is fine in certain types of writing, but when you're trying to communicate documentation and feature use, these are things that these don't belong in your writing.
Oh my God, this is one of the best things I've ever seen. These phrases should never be used. Synergy. Ping me.
Well, and see, and this is an error level. So I talked about, like, the other one was a warning. This is an error. Like, this will show up as a red, don't do it.
This is,
so yeah, this one always cracks me up. And oh yeah, the cursing one, like, yeah, that's a handy one. I'm not going to click on that because, I don't want to offend anybody. But another, like, cliches.
Oh, interesting.
There's one test I saw one time that was it was not quite gendered, but it was kind of like testing for the ways you would refer to people. So when you talk about, it was the specific example was like the grizzled engineer, like, that gives you a particular, immediately, like, you're thinking of the old school sysadmin with the beard and that's not the reality of today, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it never was the reality, but it is a stereotype. So there's somewhere in one of these, there's a test for things like grizzled or, whatever. So you don't want to, have those kinds of things. These also check. Oh, here we go. This is a good one. Gender bias.
Oh, wow.
Like,
and this is a really interesting example because it's unlike, the others, which were sort of like detecting words. This gets a little bit more complicated because it looks for it looks like, you know, programmatically looking for different things.
Yeah. So it uses a version of Go, and it uses Go, I can't remember what flavor, but it uses the Go, one of the Go versions of flavor of regexes, which actually is great, and also one of the limitations, because the particular flavor that it's using doesn't do, it has trouble looking for two words together that you always want to have together. So like, and this is why, like, I have a test, I'm going to show a demo in a minute that's going to be a two-word, supposed to be two words. So like our original example was that like Drupal uses the word modal for the pop-up windows, right? Well, Microsoft it's a dialog box. So we were using the word dialog box. So it's not a box, it's not a dialogue, it's a dialog box. So we put in a test that was just a warning level to say, make sure that this is dialog box anytime we saw the word box or dialogue. So
very cool.
But otherwise, I mean, you have these, you put together a regex and you can do all kinds of really awesome stuff with it.
So direct matching to regular expressions to even more complicated stuff that we're going to get into shortly. Let's see how this works. Like, can you show it in action?
Do that. Let me reshare with the correct window. Here we go. All right, here we go. So the big thing you have to actually configure. Ooh, that's an old one. Look at that. Previous employer.
And this is, you said this is Microsoft Visual Studio with a plugin that's doing this.
So there's an extension for Vale. There we go.
And this plugs into the command line version of Vale?
Yes, so it pulls in. So what you see down here that isn't making sense right now is this whole slew of junky down here. This is Vale giving me Meyers. So there's an extension. So if I go back to my UI here we go. I want this one. Get rid of that one. So this is my current one I'm using right now. So the styles path, I'm just telling it, this is my Vale INI file. If you're running Vale from the command line, you have to run it from wherever your INI file is, or it doesn't work. Just unless you got, I guess, your path set up correctly. I apparently do not. What I've done here is I've got the basic styles that I'm using are right good, and I've created a Tag1 style that's just for things that I know Tag1 in particular wants. So, you know, if you look, if on the left here, under my styles directory, and I installed this like long enough ago that some of those other styles weren't in it. So it just has, I just have right good. So it has things like the cliches, the passive voice tests, the passive that we saw on GitHub a few minutes ago. It has things like,
for your version to check it, you just have to have it in this list on your server or your laptop in this case.
Yeah, yeah, I have it in my local directory. So like if I'm working in, if I was working in a Git repo, I would just actually have this as part of my repo so that everybody who pulled down the repo would have the same set of rules. We would all be working on the same, from the same base assumptions. So
this is great. You know, when you said this is, you know, it's a command line, when you're giving us that overview, I was thinking, wow, that might put it out of the reach of a lot of people, but seeing this is, you know, it's totally, you know, WYSIWYG and you know, a visual setup. You know, like you're not using the command line at all. You know, everything is, you know, right out for you, color coded and beautifully put together in this editor. This is great.
Yeah, I actually don't really like using it from the command line because the output isn't as nice. Sometimes I've done it for debugging, but I very much prefer to use it in Visual Studio Code. And, or I mean, and there's, I know there's a couple of other IDEs that people have made plugins for, but I'm forgetting off the top of my head what the, what else it's that there are plugins for right now. But I mean, these are just, you know, these are the tests. We see these on the GitHub repo. So what I did, because I knew Tag1 was going to have particular things that other people don't know, I created a spelling test. So this is just, this extends the spelling class method, whatever, that says, hey, check this spelling. And then I have a list, ignore all of these words. So I made a list of things that I knew that tag words that, you know, Tag1 uses in various posts. We use Ansible, Drupal, DrupalCon, Goose, Tag1, YJS. These are all things that we see in blog posts and stuff like that. So if I use those words, it will just ignore these from now on.
I'm dyslexic, so sometimes I mix up characters. So if I write, you know, puppet correctly, it's going to ignore it. But if I swap 2 letters, it's going to catch it.
As long as it's not the 2 P's. Sorry. But yes, if you misspell it, it's still going to catch it.
Okay.
It should catch it.
Mm-hmm.
So let me see if I can figure out which one. So I wrote, I mean, I have this like, ignore it if you see Tag1 quote. Cool. The other thing I did is I wrote a test to just look for, it's going to look for a substitution. It's going to look for the word quo. If it sees it, it's going to tell me swap, use Tag1 quo instead of just quo. So I don't have, so I have this as an error, not a, I could drop that to a warning, but I mean, if I had the right kind of test written, I could put this in there, and then I would never be, and if, you know, if you do the whole continuous integration setup with, you know, you can do GitHub actions and stuff to say that you can't commit this with this error. Fix it before you commit. So things like that would never get out.
Now, does it swap it for you? You know, anytime it sees quo without Tag1 before it, does it just change it, or does it just warn you, or in this case, give you an error that says, yo, you got to change this?
It warns me. So okay. This is a blog post that I was working on, and I've put, you know, we're talking about Drupal 7 extended support. Like you and Michael gave a talk, or sorry, you and Jeremy gave a talk at DrupalCon. So this was a summary. So at the bottom, I've said, you know, to learn more about Tag1's extended support program, you want to go look at this post about Tag1 quo. Now, so because I was talking about that, it's hard to have it grasp 2 words and make sure it's always the right 2 words. I have it just to say, hey, you know, make sure this is Tag1 quo. So it's got right here, I've got in the bottom, this message that says, hey, be sure you're using this. And it tells me what line, what character, exactly where it is. If I click it, it will take me exactly to where that problem is. So that I can double check. Yep.
That's great.
So like it also says
to tell, like in this particular case, you wouldn't want to automatically swap it. Is there ever a time where you want this thing to take over and change your writing, or is that not even a possibility?
I mean, I guess it depends on what you're really after, because there's cases where you're doing things like changing a product name. But in that case, like if I'm doing that, I'm just going to search and replace, especially if it's a full, like I've pulled just a bunch of stuff down from the repo. I'm just going to search and replace it. I don't really like to do that a lot, because there are times where you're using just the way the sentence structure works, and depending on how you're referring to a thing, you may mess it. It may not flow right anymore, and you may be willing to accept that.
Let's be honest. I'm looking for a program that's going to write for me, not just like when does the AI get to the point where it can just write my emails? But
the email I'm sending you, it's like, here, what's this? No, stop.
So your recommendation as a professional writer is, you know, show the errors, show the warnings, but you should look at it and make a judgment as to, you know, how you want to put this in place.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like, I mean, this is a semi-technical post, but so if we like scroll down and we're like looking at how like widely used versions of Drupal or widely used versions of software, widely used versions are retired. This is true. This is like, there's not a good way to rewrite this in this context actively. You know,
it finds the problem, but it doesn't say, in this case, it doesn't say, you know, you should, you know, consider replacing it with this. Whereas like if you write policeman, it'll suggest, you know, maybe you want to write police officer. Okay, so sometimes it gives you suggestions, and sometimes it just says, hey, there's a problem here.
it depends on how you've written the test. So there's tests that like have a swap, and there's some that are just like, maybe reword this. So there's things like, so it has a test called, weasel. So you have words like, it's likely, this thing approximately, stuff like that. When you're using words like likely and maybe, in technical writing, it wants you want to be specific, right? Like, and when you're talking about like something, this thing is probably going to happen in this kind of a context, it's fine. But when you're talking about you click this thing and maybe this box will show up. No, that's not good for your users. You want them to know what exactly is going to happen. You want to be specific as possible.
These are, I don't know.
So it does things like catches.
I love the names. Right, good, weasel, too wordy. They're
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so the other thing is that like words, it pulls up catches things like this. There's you can add a test in for literal readability. There's, I'm going to butcher the name, but Fleisch Kincaid is one of the 2 or 3 tests that you can actually add in that looks at your language, your style, the complexity of your sentences, and gives it a grade score. So you can see like approximately the audience you're actually aiming your writing at.
Any sense of how it does that? Is it like looking at, you're using like really sophisticated words here, words that are more than so many letters? Like, is that the kind of stuff it's looking at?
Yeah, and there's a whole algorithm for, now we used Fleisch Kincaid before. I've used that one before. And so I think if I'm remembering correctly, and I mean, this is easy to find out that there, it does things like it looks at your word choice. It looks at complexity of sentences. So if you've got, the short click the button, that's, that's a lower, like, but when you do this, then this will happen. And as a consequence, blah, 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 that's a more complex sentence. So the longer the reader has to follow it and the more things that are happening in a sentence, that raises the grade level.
Okay.
Until it gets to the point where you can say, hey, 25 words is too long. You really need to stop.
And,
you need to stop and cut that in parts.
Is there a recommendation for people? Like, is that something that's part of like the Microsoft style guide? Like, we're targeting this grade, or is it just something that like you determine, for your audience, you say, we want to write in this fashion and target this grade level?
We decided that when we did it before, we decided that on our own. That's not a Microsoft thing.
Okay.
We decided that on our own because, and then we ended up, because we were trying to target like 10 to 12 grade level, and then we ended up with college and above level, because there's just, in our industry, there's so much, I don't want to say jargon, but really it's very specific to what we're doing kinds of things. When you start talking about PHP and MySQL and adding all of these, run this command and all these things that are very specific to web development and web hosting and all these things that we do, you can't make that, you can't drop it. It's really hard to drop it down to that targeted 8th grade or level or whatever.
Can you show, you put an article in here. How do you get an article in here? Do you just like create a new document and paste it in?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you have to create.
So I just made these. I just made some files over here. This was transcripts I'm working on from some of the blog posts, or from previous Tag Team Talks. I'm working on transcripts so that we have that available for people who just want to read. And then this was the blog post. So yeah, so one of the reasons you want to think about where you're using a style is literally, this is like the kind of, when we talk, we don't necessarily talk the same way we write. So our good friend Preston, he likes to start his sentences with the word so. And it's not just Preston. I'm picking on Preston because, but people use that. They use the word so. When you're writing, this is not necessarily a good way to start a sentence, but like, this is an error as far as Vale is concerned. I mean, and people do it all the time.
Yep.
And we use a lot of these very vague or, emphasis words, previously and very, and those kinds of things. And that's great because it's engaging when you're having a conversation. But it's less precise and specific when you're writing.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So you create, you import it into this program, and then how do you run Vale? Like, does it just happen, or do you need to tell it to run, or?
So with the extension in VSC, it happens when I save. So let me actually, so I've got a great example right here. So symphony. Symphony is a word that is specific to our industry, right? So I don't want it to tell me. So if we look in here, symphony, it says, is symphony actually a word? This is a spelling check. Symphony. Yep, we know symphony. Whoops, spelling exceptions. Put this in order. Symphony. I spelled that right, didn't I? Okay. So I'm going to save this exceptions file.
It's
no longer
very
tell
important
me
that you spell things right in your dictionary.
right? And I have in fact screwed that up in the past, which is why you never commit your own code, like Greg says, his thing. Because yeah, I did. I totally added the wrong thing to the dictionary, and I added it to the wrong dictionary. That was good too. Okay, so this was this is before I saved the new dictionary. So now when I save it this time, that error is gone. And now
you're telling me that symphony isn't a dirty word?
Symphony is no longer a dirty word. So now anytime that I'm writing something and I use the word symphony, it will just ignore it. Cool, symphony's a valid word. Oh yeah, so yeah, coronavirus. I can add that to the dictionary. It will go away. It will stop doing it. Whoops.
I didn't see you run it. Did you do that so fast that I missed
Corona. Yeah, all I did was save the file. Corona. I'll do it again. Virus. So I'm going to add coronavirus to my spelling dictionary. Save that file. Go back to my post that I was working on. Okay, so here's coronavirus in the UI, highlighted. Here's my error down here in the bottom. So if I just literally save the file, come on, save the file again. Really? Why aren't you working this time? Oh, you know why? Because I put spelling exceptions. It's looking for capitalized coronavirus. I need to change that. Now it's gone.
Wow. So are you resaving the blog post, or is it, okay, so you save the dictionary, you come back to your post, you save it, and on save the plugin runs.
On save the plugin runs. And then, so I had filtered it down. So there's no more spelling problems in this. So now I can go back to looking at all the other things.
And it says that there's 30 warnings in here. Is that what
30 problems.
30 problems.
I mean, and I can like hide this window and it shows up down here too. Down here in the bottom of the
I hide the window and the problems go away.
Yeah, I wish, right? If only we're that simple. And I mean, and you know, and they're not problems with this particular text just because of the style of text. If I were writing documentation, I would absolutely fix basically all of these.
Is there a Gmail plugin for this, for Vale?
I think Vale Server actually works with, actually, I'm not sure, I don't know if it works with Mail, but I know it works. I'm pretty sure it works with Google Docs. That's something I want to actually experiment with that, because right now when I'm writing things for someone, I'm like doing all the working, doing a bunch of work, and then I export it to Markdown, and then I paste the Markdown in here, and I'm double checking it here, and then I'm going back. So I'm like, it's not the cleanest workflow for me.
Yep.
But when you're working in like that Docs as code sort of methodology, you're pulling down from your repository, like, you know, you're doing a git pull, you change your files, you run Vale, you make your commit, you create your pull request, and it's all part of that very clean process for a developer.
That's great.
Or, you know, writers who are working in that kind of repository.
Let's talk about licensing fees offline. If this is something the team can use, you know, and it's reasonably priced, I think it would be a fantastic investment in, you know, getting rid of, you know, we want to automate and smooth out that process as well. Yeah.
I mean, I only have a couple tests right now for you, but that's part of my background thing here. Add a test.
Very cool.
But this is where having a company style guide, like that's the first thing that you want, because you don't, Otherwise, you end up with this kind of mishmash of stuff. Like, I know spelling, like, I know these are words we're always going to use. These are just common words for, but there's so many other things that you can do as well that are dependent on just the way that every particular company operates. Do you like your headings in sentence case? Do you like them in title case? Do you like your bullet? You do like your list this way? Do you like it that way? You know, all kinds of different things. These are like super simple examples.
Yep.
But as a junior writer, when you're bringing in a new person, being able to just be like, hey, fix all these little things, go do the thing. Or when you get like outside contributors, there's other companies like DigitalOcean, they have a lot of outside contributors, and they work with technical editors. So, you know, when you can run tests like this, you can say, here's these things we expect you to not ever send us right off the bat. And it gives you that concrete starting point where everybody's working for the same. And it just cuts off editing time.
This is great. Really appreciate you showing off how this works. It really closed the loop for me. I am going to download Studio and set this up. Maybe we'll do a tutorial on how to do that, and then I'll do this.
You know what? I would be happy to write a tutorial for that, because I love this subject. We've given, you know, we did talks on this at Write the Docs. There's the Test the Docs channel if people are interested and want to learn more about it. That's, you know, the Write the Docs community is amazing and friendly and one of the most inclusive communities I've ever been a part of. If this is the kind of thing people are interested in, there's people doing just amazing work in this space right now.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for giving us a demo and a walkthrough. I can't wait to do the how-to. Again, for everybody, you know, please remember to check out part 1, the broad overview of what these tools are. Part 2 gives you a great sense of what the different tools are that are out there and some of their strengths and weaknesses and where they're a good fit. All the links that Lynette mentioned, really, you know, interesting finds will be in the show notes. So be sure to check those out. If you like this talk, please remember to share, upvote, and subscribe. As always, you can see all of our Tag Team Talks at tag1.com/tagteamtalks, and we'd love to get your input and feedback and ideas on what kind of topics you want to see us cover in the future. You can reach out to us via tagteamtalks@tag1.com. A big thank you to everyone who tuned in and joined us today, and to you, Lynette, for walking us through all of this. That was phenomenal, really interesting. I think and hope that the people who you know joined us got a lot out of this today, and look forward to the how-to. Thank you.